Let's go to this now. The Democratic Alliance will have a new leadership or maybe a returning leadership come next month. The Sunday Times today reporting that DA Federal Council Chair Helen Zille may be back for another term, and it looks like she may be the only contender so far for that particular position. Let's look ahead at the Congress with political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze. Thank you so much, Prof, for your time this afternoon. Helen Zille possibly coming back, and reports suggesting that she may be the only contender so far. Is it because there's no one to contest with, or is it because some are thinking they shouldn't even bother going in there because she'll get it?
Yeah, we will see by tomorrow. Tomorrow's the closing date for the nominations. And as we know in politics, and sometimes at the last moment, something can still happen. She has established herself very, very solidly in this position as the Federal Council chairperson, and it's almost similar to that of the ANC Secretary General. So it is not the key; it's not the number one position. It is more of a position in terms of managing the DA as an organization from that point of view. And I think that has become now, she has established herself very solidly in that position. So I don't anticipate that there will be really a serious contestation for this position. It's more for the others, which are more, I would say, political positions. Like, for example, the federal chairperson and other positions.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But talking about, Helen Zille, she says, of course, she wants to continue her major overhaul of the party systems as well as its structures. I mean, this is a project she's been talking about since she took over in 2019. In your assessment, how has she fared?
I think the DA has established in the party itself quite a solid sort of infrastructure, organizational infrastructure. The way in which they deal with elections in the different provinces, and so even at local government level, the way in which they are managing also now the federal or the national office of them. As well as how they deal with how to identify, especially the very tricky issue of coalitions. She is to some extent involved in that, but also those of John Steenhuisen and the other federal leaders are involved in that. But I would say, like some of the other political parties, all of them are working at the moment in terms of improving the internal procedures of these parties, including the ANC, for example, with its membership system.
And I'm going to get to coalitions, hopefully, if time permits. But let's look at, the big conversation that has been taking place around Dr. Palatse, as well as, current leader John Steenhuisen. Some say that Dr. Palatse may not necessarily stand a chance, looking at, some of those that have come out publicly endorsing the current leader of the DA. How do you see this one playing out?
Well, we've seen in the past that it is very difficult for any contender to replace the incumbent leader if he or she hasn't indicated that they are going to leave this position. So we've seen it in 2020 when Mbali Ntuli stood against John Steenhuisen also. And although there was lots of expectations, in the end, she didn't receive a lot of support. I think there is something similar in line now. Dr. Palatse has been a very strong candidate so far. The fact that she was the mayor of Johannesburg gave her a lot of public exposure, and that counts definitely in favor of her. But I think it is still a difficult task, an uphill task for her to be able to replace John Steenhuisen. In future, it might be easier for her, but I think at this point he's still in a relatively secure position. Given the fact that if one looks at the results of the DA, especially in by-elections, it is generally quite satisfying for the party. It has stabilized the party. It's not losing support in terms of opinion polls. And I think that is what he will use as his ammunition in his campaign to say why he must be supported.
So you don't think that it'll matter much for some of those, who would be picking him or are thinking about their options here, especially when you look at the fact that, some of the controversies around, the statements he made around, his ex-wife, calling her roadkill, and also, under him, the DA as well having that controversial poster or billboard, if I can even put it that way, in Phoenix, saying that the DA calls you here, the ANC calls you racist, the DA calls you heroes no matter what. Will some of these controversies matter for those who are inside the DA who are going to be voting?
When it comes to voting and the choice of leadership, in individual incidents, whether it's the DA or the ANC, the EFF, or any of these other parties, actually don't count much. It is about the overall impression that the different candidates have created, the confidence that they have developed amongst the supporters, people who have made up their minds, in many cases, quite long before the time already, who they are going to support. So it's not about individual issues. It's not about individual performances or mistakes that they have made. It's about the overall package that most people, and especially persons who are voters in such a situation, on the basis of that they will make their decision. Take, for example, the consideration also about the two main provinces in the DA, the Western Cape and Gauteng. That plays a role, whether those who are the candidates and coming from the different provinces. Steenhuisen comes from KwaZulu-Natal, which means that's in a sense removed from this power balance that has developed within the DA. These are some of the more, I would say, relevant considerations that the voters at the DA's conference will take into account.
And quite interesting, Prof. I mean, I can't let you go without asking you this one. Given what we've seen happening in the past, when we then see these elections come and go, we see some opting to leave, the Democratic Alliance, others going back to their positions. How do you think, should Dr. Palatse not be successful in her bid to be the leader of the DA, do you see her simply going back to the Joburg Council, or could we see more of what we've seen in the past?
Yeah, it's difficult to give you a very definitive answer here. I think many people within the DA would like her to continue in a prominent position in the province, but maybe even at a higher level. Because it's not only elected positions that ultimately make a difference, but it can be in different capacities also that persons can make a very important impact on a party. And I think the future of the DA will benefit largely from her influence and that role that she will play. She had made an impact on the South African public with the role that she played as Johannesburg's mayor. So it will be a major loss if she will disappear from the DA. But that option always exists. Political parties, especially in view of the elections that are very close to us now in next year, they will do their utmost best to try to recruit her as a leading person.
And it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out, especially as you say in the context of 2024. Prof, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That was a political analyst, in fact, Professor Dirk Kotze, talking to us about the DA Congress that is coming up next month.